Hello everyone and welcome to today's show. Thursday the 19th of December. We're rapidly approaching Christmas. We're also rapidly approaching a busy period of festive league fixtures for Celtic that gets underway on Sunday lunchtime when we go to Tannadice to face Dundee United. It's actually our first visit to Tannadice since January 2023. Actually the first time we've played Dundee United since then as well. So that's interesting. Don't know why I'm telling you all this, because we're not talking about that game today. We're focused firmly on transfers. We're less than a fortnight now away from the opening of the January transfer window. And we know that Celtic are going to do some business, both incomings and outgoings. There was chat yesterday. I think 3 players were mentioned potentially leaving. I'm so good at this that I can't even remember who they were. Stephen Welsh was one. I think Lewis Palmer was another, and possibly Mike Naropski was the third. Maybe not a great surprise. The chat was about Stephen Welsh wanting to move on and get some first team football. He started 1 game so far this season. So I think that's probably pretty likely. So that's one to keep an eye on in terms of outgoings. Palma and Naropski, I think most people would think they'll be leaving in January, even if that's just on loan. In terms of players coming in, we've heard potentially about a left winger coming in, a third choice striker as well, a younger player. Been a bit of chat about Johnny Kenny also in recent weeks. He's out on loan at Shamrock Rovers. He's actually got his final game for them this evening, and it's a pretty big one away to Chelsea in the Conference League. So if you want a good look at Johnny Kenny, tonight might be a good time to watch that game and see what he's all about, because he's going to be returning to us shortly. But time will tell whether he's been viewed as the third choice striker for us. But certainly a left winger's been looked at, and the name Michel-Ange Balikwisha came up again yesterday. Now, a wee reminder, he's the 23-year-old Royal Antwerp left winger playing in Belgium, who we were heavily linked with in the summer. And it wasn't just paper talk either. There was something real to this. The Antwerp CEO confirmed that ourselves and Rennes, the French side, had been in contact with them about Balikwisha in the summer. Now, Rennes eventually signed a left winger. It only happened to be Jota. So it doesn't seem like they'd be in for him at this stage. I saw AS Roma potentially mentioned now. Balikwisha suffered a muscle tear, pretty bad one, at the start of the season. Injuries are going to be a bit of a theme of this video, by the way, just to give you a bit of forewarning. He suffered a pretty bad muscle tear, which basically scuppered any summer move that he was going to get, whether that was to Celtic, Rennes or elsewhere. I was reading into this, and actually Balikwisha had the same thing happen to him the previous season as well. So 2 years in a row he's had a summer move scuppered by picking up a pretty bad injury. He has eventually made his return after 4.5 months out. He came back for Antwerp in their game 10 days or so ago. I did look at the weekend, and he wasn't in their squad for the most recent match they played. But I think there is a sense that he's back and is ready now for his big move. And given that we were keen on him in the summer and we've not signed a left winger, it seems like it would make a lot of sense for us to move for him in January. So he's certainly one to keep an eye on. The Daily Mail say that a deal could be a goer. He'd be likely to cost us around £5 million, which is kind of reasonable. I think that's the ballpark that a lot of us would like to see Celtic go to now. I guess the kind of fees we would pay 5, 6, 7 years ago buying someone in for like 3.5 million, I guess that's now up to those kind of transfers. You're now talking 5, 6, 7 million. He's out of contract at Antwerp at the end of next season. So realistically, January may be one of their final times to get his true value. So I think that's one to keep an eye on. I'd love to see us do what we did with Nicholas Kuhn this time last year and bring him in. And obviously there was the hope was that Kuhn would come in right away and and take off and really take us to a new level in that right wing. And it didn't happen at all last season for Nicholas Kuhn. But now you look at the player we have, and it took him those 6 months to settle in. So maybe if we did something similar with Balikwisha, that would make a lot of sense. Clearly we're pretty strong with Dies and Maida there anyway. So if we could find someone to vie with Maida, that would be good. So yeah, Michel-Ange Balikwisha is a name to keep an eye on, certainly. So that's name one, and that's the left wing position. But what about a left back? Because a pretty big story coming out last night from quite a few outlets was that the Kieran Tierney homecoming may well be on. Now, the first part of this, the Arsenal part of this, is that Tierney is out of contract at the Emirates Stadium this summer. Arsenal did have the option to extend his deal by a further 12 months. They could potentially have done that, maybe to secure a larger fee. Sold him this summer knowing he still had another year and got a larger fee than they might end up with. But it did emerge on Wednesday, so yesterday, that Arsenal wouldn't be doing that. The deadline for them to add on the year to Tierney's contract has now passed, and he's going to be leaving Arsenal in the summer at the very latest, potentially leaving in January. He can sign a pre-contract agreement with non-English sides from January the 1st. And I think, first of all, at this point, I should just say that it's sad that it hasn't quite worked out for Kieran Tierney at Arsenal. I think when he first went in there, clearly, even by Arsenal standards, a pretty big signing at £25 million. He did really well initially. He was a really big part of the early days under Mikel Arteta. I always remember like Tierney and Saka and potentially Emile Smith-Rowe being viewed as the real shining lights players that Arsenal should build around for the future. And I think there was talk about Tierney potentially being the captain. He may even have been the captain for some games. He then clearly had injury troubles that have dogged his time at Arsenal. He's missed a hell of a lot of matches, and while he's been sitting on the sideline, Arsenal have just been improving under Mikel Arteta. So it's been unfortunate for him, and I'm sad it's not quite worked out for him at Arsenal, but ironically, I guess, he did actually play for them last night in their EFL Cup game against Crystal Palace. They won that, and it was actually his 125th appearance for Arsenal, so he's played a lot of games for them. He played 69 minutes of that game before going off with cramp. I know there had been a bit of chat that potentially he picked up another injury, but Mikel Arteta did say after the game that it was just cramp. And by the way, that was his first match he's played since Scotland-Switzerland at the Euros in Germany in the summer. So he's been missing a lot of time, a long time. He went off with a pretty bad hamstring injury in that game. But it's just one of many injuries that he's had. We'll come back to that. Now, the Celtic element of this was flagged up by a few outlets north of the border. The Scottish Sun and the Daily Mail both had reports saying that we're keen to bring him back to Celtic Park. Tierney also said to be open to the idea of returning to Celtic, open to the idea of taking a big pay cut. I believe he's on something like £120,000 per week at Arsenal. I don't know if this comes as a shock to you. Celtic aren't going to pay him that amount, but maybe he just feels returning to Celtic is the right thing for him. There's clearly a real emotional attachment there, and that goes both ways. And it's not as if Celtic don't pay a pretty good wage anyway. Just in relative terms, it's not quite as good as what the Premier League can offer. So there's not much other information from the Scottish outlets, but basically the story here, just to underline it, is that Tierney's going to be leaving Arsenal summer at the latest, potentially in January. Celtic want to bring him back. Brendan Rodgers wants to bring him back, and we'll wait and see if a deal can be done. Clearly, there's a bit of upheaval for us at left back. As things stand at the moment, neither Greg Taylor nor Alex Valle will be with us at the start of next season. Taylor himself can speak to new clubs from the start of January as well. And up until this point, I've been, I think, quite hopeful that Greg Taylor's new deal would be signed, and I felt that was a lot of chat in the summer while the transfer window was open, and maybe it was just a case of Celtic focusing all their efforts on recruitment, and then when the window closed, would then negotiate a new deal with Taylor. Clearly, a number of months have passed since that point, and there's not really been any progress. So it does seem as time goes on more likely that Greg Taylor's going to move on at the end of the season. Clearly, at his best, Kieran Tierney would be viewed as an upgrade on Greg Taylor. He's a brilliant player. The big question would be his recent injury record, and he has had his fair share of injuries since leaving us in 2019. I mean, here's the full list taken from Transfermarkt, and yeah, there's a number of different ones, a lot of hamstring injuries there, knee surgery, knee injuries, abductor injury. Like they're pretty substantial ones as well when you look at the days and the matches missed. I mean, the most recent one from the one I was talking about from Scotland at the Euros, he's missed 37 matches at the start of this season, and yeah, that's the longest one there, but there's a lot of ones. I mean, 96 days for that first one, 98 days there in the middle, even 54 days is a couple of months. So he's clearly had a lot of injury troubles, and I think that would put a lot of people off the idea of us signing Kieran Tierney. And I think that's valid. Despite all of that, as a fan and I guess the wee boy that still roams inside me, I can't help but feel excited about the prospect of Kieran Tierney coming back. And as I say, it's I'll be honest, it's probably more emotional than whatever the other one is. I loved him as a player the first time around. I loved that he was a Celtic fan out there playing for us, and he understood it all and all the stuff that we felt. But he was also like an unbelievable player, like the best left back I've seen at Celtic. Such a good player, even at Champions League level. And there's a reason he earned his move to Arsenal for £25 million. That wasn't because he was a Celtic fan, that was because he was a hell of a fullback. And when you see him play, he still looks good. It's just that he doesn't play regularly enough, and I'm guessing people would be worried about him coming in and missing a lot of time. So maybe I get the reservations, but just for a second, allow yourself to imagine a back four of Alistair Johnson, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Austin Trusty, and Kieran Tierney, with Kasper Schmeichel behind them and Callum McGregor just in front of them. I mean, that's properly top stuff. That could be a really, really solid. Really solid foundations, and obviously going forward we're pretty good as well. So maybe the idea would be to get Kieran Tierney in and another reliable left back. I mean, if it was Kieran Tierney and Alex Valle potentially vying for those places, I would say that's a pretty good scenario, pretty exciting, and maybe we'd be able to manage Kieran Tierney to an extent. That's just some thoughts I have. Anyways, as I say again, it seems regardless of what I think, what you think, that Brendan Rodgers wants Kieran Tierney back at the club, and Tierney appears to be up for that too. So we'll keep an eye on things, and I'm sure it will be a pretty big talking point. I'm already imagining all of the comments coming in under this video. I'm sure we'll return to this. The final player we've been linked with is a much more vague one. It comes from a Norway football page written in Spanish, which is about as vague as it gets. It links us with Sarpsborg left winger Sondre Ørjasæter. Their tweet reads, Celtic and Red Bull Salzburg have shown interest in Sarpsborg winger Sondre Ørjasæter. The 21-year-old has scored 5 goals and provided 5 assists in the Eliteserien this season. We'll just say one thing, great player. Again, it's a left winger. He looks pretty handy from the YouTube compilation that I watched literally about 15 minutes ago. Left winger, quite tall I think, quite strong runner, quite quick, but it's hard to tell for these YouTube compilations whether you're looking at the next Erling Haaland or the next Odin Holm. No disrespect to the latter. So, yeah, no other real information there. It may well be that he's just one of many players on our list. he certainly looks talented, as I say. Just a final wee note for today. Alistair Johnson speaking to the media, saying that he fought through the pain barrier to play in Sunday's League Cup final against Rangers. You may recall that he picked up a hip flexor injury in Zagreb. It was quite an awkward fall for him from memory near the end of the first half there. And admitted that he probably wouldn't have played at the weekend had it not been such a big game. Said he also had a pretty awkward slip early on in the derby, about 10 minutes in, and was fearing the worst at that stage. Thought it was going to be a long afternoon to get through that game, but clearly he managed to. But saying all that, it does make you think that on Sunday against Dundee United, Anthony Ralston will probably be in to start that game, and we can start to preview that from tomorrow with the video. We'll chat to you then, everyone.